I'm joined by Chris on today's episode, and Chris is from SMI Financials. Now, for SMI Financial Solutions, Chris and his partner Rebecca, as well as joined by Anthony, are all part of the team at SMI, and they offer support in the world of financial planning as well as mortgage broking. Chris is an avid rugby league fan, loves hitting the gym up from time to time, taking his kids to all the extracurriculars, being a very busy person, but most importantly, Chris is a financial planner with a lot of investment experience. And, I talk about that a lot when it comes to working with professionals. It just makes sense when they are invested in the journey too. And Chris is definitely one of those with a multi-million-dollar property portfolio across both residential and commercial. Now, Chris comes to talk about today's discussion around successful financial plans, as well as considering the world of protection, because we all go through this wealth building journey when it comes to building wealth that involves taking on a lot of debt. And so from this perspective, Chris breaks it down in more detail to ensure that we've got an environment that is well protected. But in saying that, Chris goes through different examples of what's happened in his own life and how they can shape some of the thinking that you might have on your journey of building wealth. And when it comes to financial planners, it's really, really important to learn about how they approach things, because it's all about that perfect fit, then the strategy. That's what I find works really well when working with professionals. And for those who are after someone who's measured, extremely holistic, and also someone with personal experiences that, far outweigh many others in the same space, then I definitely recommend having a chat to Chris. Now, if you'd like to reach out to Chris on this episode, it's SMI, M for Mary, that is, financialsolutions.com.au. He's based out in Bella Vista, so my stomping grounds in the northwest of Sydney, or northwest of Sydney, however you want to call it. And Chris is someone who's an absolute gentleman, which will no doubt showcase in this episode, because you'll get to hear from someone who's truly been through many life experiences, and that's something that I'm always searching for when speaking to other business professionals. Someone who's had the experiences that I can leverage off, learn off, apply, and get ahead for my family. I hope this helps, and tune into the show. Chris, a massive thank you for joining us. And that, by the way, is Chris from SMI Financial Solutions. Mate, I thought I'd start off with just taking a step back and I guess understanding more about your journey in the business that you run here, and what got you into doing what you do, because I find that always fascinating.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I've been a financial planner for 15 years. It's one of those jobs that I've always wanted to do, and I've always wanted to run my own business, so it was just a natural fit. I always loved investing, even when I wasn't an advisor, whether that be shares or property. And I just wanted to sort of help people get ahead, so it was a natural fit for me.
Awesome, mate. And I know one thing, and this is something I really enjoy about you, particularly in the financial planning space, is that you're an investor yourself. And I don't mean this lightly. People thrive in environments where we're all on the journey together. I think that's where customers get the best results. And oftentimes, I don't like to compare it to this industry, but it's such an easy one to do. Imagine you've got a really unhealthy, unfit personal trainer. It's like, I'm not saying we should judge and throw away their knowledge, but I do mean like inspiration is important to achieve the goals we want to achieve. And you've been on the journey yourself. I mean, could you take a step back and just take us through, I guess, your personal journey from investing and your philosophy on it overall, I guess?
Yeah, my philosophy is, has always been just making sure that each day or each month I'm doing something. That might be buying a few shares, that might be buying a new property, so that I'm always kind of progressing my wealth. And I've got a really good understanding of what I want to achieve in my own personal life from a finance point of view. Want to pay off the house, want to put the kids through private school, want to, retire at a point in time that I want to retire so that I can travel and do all of those sorts of things. And I know that just going to work, paying the tax man, trying to save a little bit is just not going to help me achieve that. So very early on, I realised that. So I've been an active investor for quite some time. There's nothing that I tell my clients or advise my clients to do that I probably haven't done myself or am currently doing. And I think that's probably a big difference between myself and particularly like a bank financial planner where you walk in, they've got a brochure of different products they can sell. It's not what I do. And it's not the kind of conversations that I want to have with people.
Yeah. And, on your journey from residential property, commercial property, and including, I guess, the wealth side of investing in stocks and other things, there was not the smoothest of journeys in terms of some things that have come up on the personal side of life. And I think this is a really good segue into how long-term investing should be, but also all the different things that can come up. And what I mean by this for those tuning in is that we go through goal setting in this financial planning world, and we go through what we want to achieve by retirement, and we all want the best for us and our families. But there's, the unexpected moments that can come up, and health, whether it be, cancer, whether it be injuries, whether it be, job losses. This can hit us all, even the most fit, the healthy, the best, the most experienced, and so forth. And I know this is a story that is about you personally, but would you mind giving us some insights in terms of what went on in your life, what you had to go through, and suddenly how your world shifted, but also the importance of protection in supporting investors?
Yeah, it was a really interesting journey. About 3 years ago, I built up a really substantial portfolio. Kids were in private school. My wife, I'm really lucky that I get to work with my wife every day. Something that we really enjoy. Obviously, she's got an administration operations background, so from a client point of view, she adds a lot to value, but she doesn't give advice. So the business is very much built around my ability to go and see clients and sit down and have a really good conversation. About 3 years ago, I was at football, screaming and yelling, and at the grand final, I lost my voice, which went to the doctor. No harm, no foul, here's some antibiotics. About a week later, my voice came back, all good. My wife was feeling around on my neck, as she often does, and said, hey, your gland on your right side is a little bit inflamed. Maybe you should go back to the doctor. Thank you, I've got a really good GP. He said, yeah, look, come back, let's have a chat. Did some tests. From that point in time, within 3 weeks, I'd had 2 operations. I had tonsil cancer, so I lived forever.
Wow.
But
yeah.
I didn't on and off didn't work for about a 2-year period. I remember sitting in front of my whiteboard with my accountant and talking about the debt that we had and our obligations regarding the office, staff. And then we mapped out, right, well, that debt was covered by that insurance. These medical bills will be covered by this insurance. You're going to lose some income for a while, so that's the policy that we've got to do that. The funniest thing, not that it was a funny experience, and I'm glad it kind of happened when I was 40 and not 55, was I was sitting down in front of my accountant and we're going through the whiteboard, and I looked at my wife and she had a smile, and I said, are you smiling because I've got cancer? And she said, no, I'm just really glad that you thought about all of this stuff before you had cancer.
Wow. That's a moment right there, right? Because that is, firstly, very distressing when it goes through the moment of it all happening. But then to have that weight off your shoulders to know that, you're practicing what you preach, but be in a position of protecting loved ones, your clients' futures too, because they need you to be there for them. Yeah. And then also yourself and your family. And if I'm not mistaken, you've got a couple of kids who are, into all sorts of sports as well.
Oh, they certainly keep us busy. So, yeah, I've got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, so really young family. James was about 6.5, Sam was 2.5 when we went through that.
Yeah.
I sort of explained to people I did cancer really well. If I needed to go to a private hospital, I did. If I didn't feel like travelling into my chemo, we had the money there so that I could get an apartment. And rather than doing that, I guess the best thing for me was my son recently did a thing at school about really inspirational people in his life. And he said, oh, look, my grandmother, Dad, she went through cancer. She had this horrible treatment and all of that. It was terrible. She's my inspirational person. And my wife said, James, do you realise Dad went through that as well? And he was oblivious to it. So our job as parents was kind of to protect our children from that really traumatic event. And thankfully, we had everything organised financially so that we didn't have to place our family in a burden when we went through that. So I'm pretty chilled that my kids don't really remember it.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I guess that moment of inspiration for the kids in terms of who they look up to as well is pretty special there. But not having them actually go through any of the hardships, or the majority of the hardships, or having to remember it is such a key part. Now, when it comes to clients that are on the journey, we obviously work with many investors that are, debt is the favorite thing for them at a certain time, right?
Yeah.
There's a saying in the banks, when we used to work in the banks from 2010 to, I think, 2011 all the way to 2017, our measure in the branches of someone's wealth was not how much cash they had, but it's how much debt they could take.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy? It used to be this world like, oh, the cashed up $1 million, $2 million, but then it turned into a moment of, oh, well, okay, cool, you got $1 million, $2 million, but how much can you borrow, right? And so now when you think of that, you've got people who are on a journey realizing the power of investing, which is awesome, by the way, people realizing the power of that today. But they're taking on large amounts of debt. In your mind as a financial planner, when you think of clients, when is that sweet spot when they should consider protection? Because there's moments where they think, well, I just got one loan. Or there's moments where it's like, I'll wait till I have 10, 5. And then there's other moments like, I should just have it as I keep going.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your thoughts of different scenarios, the it depends moments, and what it makes sense with.
My philosophy around protection is, what's your plan? So we've got this debt, we owe X amount of dollars, which really is irrelevant how much you owe. It's your ongoing financial contribution that you need to pay CBA or ANZ. That might be $2,000, that might be $10,000, that might be even more, depending on how mature your property portfolio is. The question I ask clients is, what's the plan if you can't go to work, or you get sick, or you get cancer, to pay for that obligation? Now, if there's a plan in place, then we obviously don't need to worry about having too much insurance. But if we don't have a plan and we don't know, is this a risk you want to take on? Some people want to take the risk on. I personally wouldn't, and I'd advise my clients not to. So there's never really a right time. It's more about the educational point of pointing out, right, we owe X amount of money every week to ANZ. If I get sick, right, can my wife cover those repayments? Well, in my situation, no, she can't, because she can't replace my income. So we need to have something in place where somebody else takes on that risk. And that's going to be different for every different couple, because whilst I'm very pro having protection mechanisms in place, insurance is expensive. And I can't tell people it's not, because it is. But as long as we've got a plan to address that, and we know what that plan is, when people have that whiteboard moment where they go, right, X has happened, we know what the plan is. Because once you have the whiteboard moment and you haven't got anything in place, it's much difficulter to try and fix that.
Yeah, I think that's given me a lot of clarity in terms of when it could be the right moment for people, because it's not just the moment, it's about the scenario that they're in, what sort of costs will work, what won't work. Now, in the world of insurance, this is my last question on it. When we break apart the different types of covers and what they mean, just to kill the jargon for people, because some people think it's just if you pass, some people think it's if a certain event occurs, and it's a confusing world out there with the many product disclosure statements, the compliance around it, the testing, the someone wants to, know your whole history, someone doesn't want to know much about you. I guess, what stuff is there that exists out there, and why are each of these different things important?
So if we look at my situation and that whiteboard moment, and we went through this as 4 really key milestones. So there was the initial shock of, I can't work, I'm going to have medical expenses. Look, most of it's covered by private health, but if I wanted to do it right and get cans rather than drive, or get an apartment, there was a sum of money that I needed as a lump sum up front, literally before I hit the second surgery. So that's what we like to call trauma insurance or something. It's a lump sum that's paid on the diagnosis of a particular event. So then we go through, right, well, I've got the lump sum. How long am I not going to be able to work for? Who's going to replace my income? And that's where we have something called income protection, which will step in after a waiting period, which is different for everyone, and replace my income while I can't go to work. So I've ticked off those two things. Then we looked at the longer term problems of, okay, if this cancer's worse and you never get your voice back, I'm pretty open to the fact that I spend most of my day talking to people. If I can't talk, that's bad. What will happen because I've got my income, but that's only a percentage of my salary. So I'm going to lose 30% in that conversion. Who picks up that bill? If I am disabled or something like that and I can't ever work again, I'm probably going to need a lump sum of money to transfer myself into a new career or new objectives, because essentially I hit retirement.
Yeah.
So I have something called TPD, or total permanent disability insurance. So I'd actually mapped out what that looked like for myself. And those numbers change. They change every year, depending on what I'm doing with debt levels and what the cash level is and all of those things. Then I had the one that, okay, well, if I do die, and this is worse than, and thankfully that didn't happen, but we mapped it out. Who picks up my kids' education funds? That's $600,000 to educate my kids. Who pays for the mortgage? Because my wife can no longer earn the kind of income I wanted. I personally wanted my wife to be able to have that. I generally use that laughing joke. I'm going to pay my income for 5 years. You'll be debt free. Then you're a good looking girl. You go and find someone else. What does that financially look like? Do I want to pay out everything? Do I want to pay her for 5 years? Where's that sweet spot in the insurance where I can cover the premium? It's not going to destroy my wealth, because there's no point. Insurance isn't there just to hope that you one day get sick. That's not a strategy to retire. But we needed something in place. And they're the four kind of mathematical, taking the emotion out of insurance is really important. It's just a mathematical equation of, okay, if these four events happen, how did we work out this number? Why have we got the cover? And I generally find if you know that, then you're not so disheartened with insurances when you get those letters that say, hey, my premium's gone up.
When I think of my own situation, just hearing this all, it reminds me of the last couple of years where a lot of life events would happen for many, right? The pandemic, my mum, she'd passed away, 3 years ago now. And then, my partner's dad, and there's just so many events that happen. And that was a wake up call for me to go, okay,
yeah,
this needs to, be looked at. And I think there's a distressing part of it happening so young, where I'm in my 30s and you see all these people around you, but also there's that fortunate part that I learn now around you don't want that to happen to your family members and things. And so, especially when, I think of all the early mornings and late nights that we've been grinding to build a business that's successful, to build investments, to, grow our wealth, taking risks that others didn't want to take during certain times where they wanted to sit back. At some point you've got to look at it and go, well, if I did all that, how would I feel if that wasn't there? And so that's such a crucial part to look at it, not only from coverage, but also from the different types that exist. I guess the next thing I'd love to pick your brain on is, we all think of retirement, and the first thing that retirement, when it comes to mind, is, are you only want to be okay retirement age? And there's a leading up to retirement, years where people actually don't realize how much can actually be done in the years leading up to it. I think of it firstly from a perspective of, it's likely where you're the richest in life experience, the richest in relationships, and you should technically be the richest in wealth position in those golden years, right? So why leave it then to the last moment to figure out something, and why not get as prepared for it as possible, but also in the years leading up to it, there's strategies that come up that don't typically show themselves in the many years prior to that. I'd love to pick your brain of how a financial planner comes into it, inserts themselves and goes, okay, doing this and doing that and potentially looking at this could be game changers. Would just love to understand your thoughts.
I think financial planning from when I started 15 years ago was very much about products and solutions, whereas now it's more about, okay, what's the advice that we can give people to achieve their goals? So I always like to start with the goals part, and I spend more time around what does retirement look like for you? Does it involve travel? Do we want to be debt-free? Some people will carry debt in retirement. Do we want to leave a legacy for our children? Because all of those are important factors. If we know that in retirement, in today's dollars, I want $75,000 worth of income. Anyone who in Sydney who thinks I'm debt-free, I can live off less than $75,000 a year, I think is probably dreaming. So we spend $1,000 a week easily just paying rates and food and all of those things. Let's say I want to have a bunch of travel or something like that in place where I want to go overseas. We're going to need another at least $25,000 a year after tax. So I then know, okay, well, what's my income going to be in retirement? And what assets do I need to buy to achieve that goal? Now, some people are very pro-property. Everyone loves property. Some people are pro-shares. I'm kind of a bit more in the middle where I've got a substantial property portfolio, but I've got some commercial and I've got some shares. Really, that it's about working out what's the easiest way to own those assets and what tax structure should it live in for retirement? Because when we retire, different assets, different structures will give us different outcomes. I'm not a big fan of doing just one thing and one thing only. I'm a big fan of, okay, well, let's address your super fund. Let's make sure that we're using the cash that's available in an effective way. Let's use the tax while you're working, because at the end of the financial year, you write your check to the ATO. Once it's gone, it's gone. On the 1st of July, we'll start at zero again. So what are the tax strategies that we can do to minimize your tax and grow your wealth? And it's different for every person. Some people have lots of disposable income that they don't know what to do with. Some people, we've got to create that additional income sources, because I use my wife. She says, Chris, we need $2,000 a week to run the household. By the time we pay for pets and dogs and kids at school, that's what we need. So you can invest everything above that $2,000 a week, as long as it doesn't reduce my $2,000 a week, because that's what we need. So I kind of focus on, how do I build assets that are going to help me achieve my goals and help me not reduce that $2,000, because that's not negotiable. So it's actually about sitting out and working out. And it's the boring part, but most exciting for me is what is your budget like? What does it look like? Are you spending more than you earn? Because first of all, we've got to address that. Any kind of investing starts with budget. What have we got the ability to put towards investing? And if we don't have, what do we need to do, whether it be debt level, whether it be from a budgeting level, so that we've got some surplus cash to invest?
What it sounds like, there's a big element of items in your control. And I think that's where people really mess up with investing, is they think everything's driven by a market, how aggressively you can buy, and that's it. There are so many facets that you've touched on, which is, okay, what's your budget? What's your barriers and perimeter of like certain income you need to have? What are you actually aiming for? What are the structures we're looking at? What are the different ways to get there? A little bit could come from super, a little bit from your property investing, a little bit from business or other ventures. And so I think when I hear this all, it's sounding like, look, yes, if you're pro-property and you're listening to this, let's get that going. Let's build the engine room. Let's have something chugging along. But then as you've got that, let's be more holistic in thinking and start to go, well, what's the number I want? What's the minimum number I need to have, and everything above that I do X with? What can I control on my budget to fast track that outcome or shore it up? And then who can I have in my team, like yourself, to be able to visualize this for me and show me what it's going to take to get there, which vehicles will get there. And it doesn't have to wait till you're 60 to get this right. And it shouldn't technically. Ideally, we should be using the power of time to get this right in our 30s, 40s, and even earlier or later, depending on where you're at now. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing to go into the world of, pre-retirement thinking, planning. Obviously, hearing it from someone who's in the game, it's so important to recognize that you're an investor yourself. And lastly, to touch on an important topic of the world of insurance, because I do think that in the insurance space, it's less talked about only because people, think of A, it's not something that might happen to me, and then B is, oh shit, it's another thing I have to pay for. So I think when you have it won't happen to me and I've got to pay for something that won't happen to me, you got a lot of resilience in the mindset, but I've obviously understood it the hard way from family and other things, and so have you. This is why it's important to me on my journey, and I just want everyone to get to their goals but not have anything stop them from getting there. So that's the key.
Sounds good, mate. Thank you for your time.
Mate, how can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
Easiest way to reach out, give me a call on the mobile. It's 0421 351 422. Let's just have a chat. It's not necessarily about, and certainly shouldn't be about, me trying to sell you something, because it's not what I do. I don't have a tool bag of things that I have to sell. I essentially give advice and look at what you want to do, what you've got, are the structures right, and put a plan together so that we can achieve that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, and speaking of selling, Chris is in Bella Vista, and with this portfolio, he doesn't really have to sell. So to be honest, if there's someone you want to talk to on the financial planner that's got life figured out and they're in a pretty nice pocket of Sydney and they could probably chill out for the rest of life, it's speaking to someone like that, and that's where you know that it's not because they have to, it's because they want to, and that's Chris.
Yeah, work with someone that doesn't need to go to work would be my viewpoint. There's no point me going to work and I need to earn X amount of money every day, so I'm going to sell something. I'm at a really unique point in my life where I get to work with some really amazing people, but at the same point in time, I don't have to work every single day, and I get to work with the people that really resonate with me, and that I really resonate with. So I'm pretty fortunate to do that.
Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Talk soon.